Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss any update from RAU'S IAS Study Circle. Join the only official Telegram channel of RAU'S IAS Study Circle to get the relevant materials and important updates.
Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, the what, why, and how of the newspaper analysis from the civil service examinations perspective. So today we are going to discuss the Hindu Daily edition dated 28th October 2022. The important topics which are to be discussed have been displayed on your screen, and the timestamping of the same has been provided in the description box below. So let us begin with this topic. This topic has appeared at page number 16 in today's The Hindu Daily edition, and as you can see by the heading, the topic is in relation to the cotton textile industries. The context of this very news article is that recently our Union Textile Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, has said that textile manufacturers should start securing the cotton to meet their requirement. The context is not very directly related to the UPSC syllabus, but when it comes to the UPSC syllabus, this cotton textile industry is very important. Because UPSC in General Studies Mains Paper 1 section of Geography mentions the locational factors which affect the industrial distributions. So in this very line, in today's session we are going to discuss what are the various locational factors which affect the distribution of cotton textile industries in India as well as across the world. In the second part of this session, you will come to know that if you understand all these locational factors in detail, you can easily come up with the reasons responsible for various shifts in the cotton textile industries. So, we will also discuss the shifts in the cotton textile industries from the global as well as Indian perspective. So, in this line, let us begin our discussion. So, before discussing the locational factors, first we should understand that industries are basically categorized into two sections based on the nature of the raw material. One are the weight losing industries and other are the weight gaining industries. So the weight losing industries are those industries whereby the raw material substantially reduces its weight when it gets converted into the final product. So there is a substantial loss of weight. And that is why, in order to reduce the transportation cost, the weight losing industries are situated in close proximity to the raw material. For example, iron industries. On the other hand, weight gaining industries are those industries whereby when the raw material enters into the final product, it increases its weight. And that is why the weight gaining industries are located near to the market areas. When we discuss about the cotton textile industries, we understand that here cotton is the prime raw material. And as far as the nature of cotton is concerned, this is a pure raw material. Now, what is pure raw material? By pure raw material, we mean that whatever the weight of this raw material is, all of it enters into the final product. So by this logic, the cotton textile industries can be located in proximity to the raw material as well as in proximity to the markets. But when we go by the data for the Indian cotton textile industries, we find that almost 80% of the cotton textile industries are coterminous with the cotton growing areas like Maharashtra, Gujarat, Karnataka, Telangana, parts of MP, parts of Andhra, etc. So now in continuation with this, we will discuss the locational factors. The first factor is obviously proximity to the raw material as we have discussed here. So the regions which are favorable for the cotton growth are the regions which have humid climate because the moisture is good for the cotton threads. Second, the areas which are rich in black soil, the land which is having even topography, the temperature which is relatively warm, that means the tropical conditions. So these are the factors which favor the growth of cotton, and all these factors are present in this part of India, and this is the reason that why most of the industries are situated in this particular region. The second most important factor is the labor availability. Almost all the textile industries are labor intensive in nature. And that is why when it comes to the labor availability, there are two components which are important. One is the labor cost, other is the labor skills. So obviously, the cheap labor favors the growth of any industries, and high skilled labor also favor it. But when it comes to the textile industries, especially for India or the similar developing economies, we find that the cheap labor availability is very important. But now we also understand that with the growth in automation, robotics, and with so much of digital technologies, the requirement of the skilled laborers in the textile sector is also growing. Let us take one very basic example. Now, for the success of any industry, the profit is must. And to gain the profit, the selling of the product is must. And for that selling, marketing and promotion of that very product is required. And in today's world, when everything is going digital, the scope of digital marketing has increased. So that means in order to tap the true market potential and in order to sell the products of very high volume, the digital marketing for the cotton products will be required. And for this digital marketing, obviously, the skilled laborers will be required. The third important factor The third important factor is the availability of market. But again, this market should also be understood, and there are various factors which promote the growth of these markets. For example, the first is the areas of tropical climate, that is, warm climatic conditions will obviously favor the demand for thin fabric like cotton. Second is the income levels. Similarly, the third is the population levels. So obviously the regions having higher demographic load, having better income to purchase the cotton products and having warm conditions which necessitates them to purchase cotton products will be favorable to boost the market of any particular area. The next factor is the transportation. Now this transportation again provides two types of industrial linkages. We all know them, forward linkages as well as backward linkages. Now what are the backward linkages? It is farm to industry. What are forward linkages? It is industry to market. And therefore various transportation means like roads, rails, airways, waterways, etc. are required. But in today's time, we understand that not just the domestic market, but there is a very high scope in foreign market also. And in the times of globalization, we need to tap the potential of the foreign markets, and for that, we must have port facilities. So, because of the presence of so much of port facilities on India's western coast, we find that many of the industrial sites are on the west coast of India. And same is true for the cotton industries as well. The last factor comes in the form of government policies. Now, because the government is also trying to promote manufacturing industries to boost up its national economy as well as per capita income. And therefore, various government policies in terms of subsidies, tax rebates, capital infusion, free trade agreements, ease of doing business, etc., play their role. So these are the various locational factors which affect the distribution of the cotton textile industries. So now if you have closely understood and analyzed all these locational factors, you can come up with the reasons why there have been significant shifts in the cotton textile industries. But for that, first obviously you should know that what are those shifts. So when it comes to the global perspective, we all know that during the ancient times, the Asian countries like India and China were the leading players when it came to the textiles, as well as more specifically for the cotton textiles. But then the location of these industries, or rather we can say the dominance of these industries shifted to the European economies of UK, France as well as Spain. Now, what were the reasons which led to the shift of the domination of the cotton textile industries from India and China towards Europe? The first reason responsible for this was the Industrial Revolution. With the coming of the power loom, the handloom sector was hit very hard, and these industries had the power to produce these cotton products at a very high level, with mass productions. The second important factor was the colonial domination of these economies across the world. Again, let us take the example of England and India. Now, why British colonized India? British colonized India, one, to get the raw material, second, to make India as its market. But when we specifically talk about cotton, we know that India, because of various natural factors, has a very high potential to grow the cotton as raw material, as well as because India was having a very high population as well as tropical climate, there was also a market. So when it comes to the cotton or textile industries, India was serving the purpose of raw material as well as market both to British, and that is why it colonized India. And now because British had domination over the Indian territories, hence British had domination over the cotton textile industries as well. The third reason was the naval strength of European countries. Now, this navy of these European countries, along with providing them the better military capability, they also provide them with better navigation skills. So now they can collect the raw material from across the world, they can sell their final products also across the world, and because of this better transportation facilities with them, they gained the control. However, in recent times, because of other factors, there again has been a significant shifts in the location of these industries. Now we all know that Europe is facing the era of deindustrialization, and most of the manufacturing industries are being shifted from Europe towards India, towards China, towards Southeast Asia as well as East Asia like Japan. And same was true with the cotton textile industries also. For example, in Japan, the cities like Osaka and Hyogo etc. gained prominence. Similarly, when it came to the Bangladesh, we had Dhaka. When we go to China, there the textile centers have been developed in cities like Beijing and Shanghai. And when it comes to India, we all know that there are several cities in India, for example, Mumbai, Kolkata, Coimbatore, Nagpur, Ahmedabad, Kanpur, Lucknow, etc., where the cotton industries are very prevalent. The reasons for this shift are somewhat different and unique from these factors. What are the reasons? First is obviously the abundant and cheap availability of the labor. As we have discussed that cotton textile is very labor intensive, so the cheap availability of labor in the Asian economies provided the industrialists to be attracted towards these areas. Second was the capital growth in these economies. With rising GDPs, rising per capita incomes, these economies witnessed the rise in their capital base also. Again, this rise in capital base boosted the investors' confidence. Third was the government policies. For example, countries like India and Bangladesh excessively are focusing towards ease of doing business policies. Countries like China have invested a lot in establishing their own domestic manufacturing hubs. So, all these policies again are favorable to develop any industries. Again, same is true for the cotton industries as well. Then came with the transport modernization. So, with the modernization of the transport facilities in terms of rail, roads, airways, waterways, ports, etc., the Asian countries again are gaining dominance for the cotton industries. Now, similar thing has also been witnessed in India as well. So, now we will see what was the shift in the cotton industries in India. So, there are two significant shifts. One is the regional shifts. So, regional shift is from the old nuclei, that is Mumbai, towards the new nuclei, that is the other cities. We will discuss which are those cities. So the first shift is the regional shift, and second shift is the shift in the nature of these industries. That is, now the cotton industries are shifting from large integrated mills towards small cottage based unorganized, or MSME type industries. So earlier, one city, that is Mumbai, or more specifically the Maharashtra region, was the most dominant region when it came to the cotton textile industries, obviously because of the presence of the cotton growing areas. But then it shifted to various other cities. For example, Ahmedabad, Kanpur as well as Lucknow, Vishakhapatnam, Coimbatore, Bangalore, Kolkata, etc. Now, the reasons responsible for this were very unique. For example, the reason for the shift of cotton industries in Kanpur and Lucknow was growth in the capital base. In Kolkata, it was the provision of the port facilities. The same was true for Vishakhapatnam also. In Ahmedabad, the reason was high availability of entrepreneurship skills. In Bangalore, the reason was high demand, that is, high market, because Bangalore emerged as an IT hub. In Coimbatore, the reason was the clothing patterns because they are having tropical climate. So these were various factors which led to the regional shift from the old nuclei towards the newer cities as far as the cotton industries are considered. So again, here I am repeating this point that these are the shifts in the cotton industries from the global as well as India's perspective. But the reasons for these shifts are somewhat lying in the basic locational factors which affect the distribution of the cotton industries. If you understand these very factors, you can come up with the reasons for any shifts in any industries. And therefore, we will revise the locational factors in brief once again. The first locational factor was the proximity to the raw material, that is, the areas which have these particular conditions are more favorable or are more natural to grow the raw material, that is cotton, and hence they will attract the industrial establishments in that region also. Second, because of the labor intensive nature of the textile industries, the cheap as well as skilled labor are highly useful for the cotton industries. Then we discuss the market factor. Obviously, the higher market will provide the industries the higher potential to sell their products and to gain more profits. Then we discuss the transportation facilities in terms of roads, rail, airways, waterways, etc., which provide forward as well as backward linkages for these cotton textile industries. And in the last, we discuss how government policies like subsidies, tax rebates, capital infusion, FTAs, ease of doing business, etc., play their role in distributing the cotton industries in a particular region. This topic is in relation to the United Nations Environment Programme, that is UNEP's recent report, which is published just before the COP27 summit, which is going to be held in the city of Sharm el Sheikh, which is in Egypt. So this topic is mainly relevant from the prelims perspective. There are just factual informations which are relevant from the prelims perspective, but this report is of high value when it comes to the value addition points in your mains answers, because the key findings of this particular report can be utilized to substantiate your arguments, your claims in the domains of climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, global warming, pollution, etc. related questions. So that is why this report becomes important from prelims as well as mains perspective. So the report which UNEP has come up is the emissions gap report. This is the annual report which is published by UNEP every year. Now, as the name suggests, this report basically deals or analyzes with the gaps in the emissions which the countries have pledged or are required to control the climate change versus the actual emissions which the countries are contributing to the atmosphere. So this report is basically the critical analysis of the various steps of various countries in the domain of emissions control. And this report of 2022 has come up with certain key findings which are relevant from our examinations point of view also. The first key thing which this report has come up is that the target of 1.5 degrees Celsius which was laid down during the Paris summit is likely to be missed if the present rates of the emissions by various countries continue. So this report firmly believes that the targets set by the Paris Agreement are likely to be missed. Second, the report says that there was a significant reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions during the COVID pandemic times. Even we have witnessed in India the returnings of the dolphins in the aquatic Ganga system. There was a marked reduction in the air quality index across various cities like Delhi, Ghaziabad, Kanpur, etc. So, same was the case across the world also. But in the post COVID pandemic times, the emission rates, the emission contributions are bouncing back to the pre COVID levels. So the reduction in emission during COVID times was a very temporary aspect. It has not led to change in the long term behavioral aspects of us as an individuals or countries. It was a temporary phase, but as soon as the pandemic is over, the emissions are bouncing back to the pre COVID levels. The third key finding is related to the G20 countries. And the report says that the progress which has been made by the G20 members is not on track on meeting the targets set by the Paris deal. The fourth important finding is in relation to the net zero emission targets. Though the report says that these net zero emission targets are the step in right direction, yet there are large ambiguities when it comes to the interpretation of these targets by various countries. And that is why, because of the prevalence of these large ambiguities, the credibility of these net zero emission targets is still very low, and the time will tell that where these targets will lead us. And that is why, on the basis of all these findings and evidences, the report says that still there exists large amount of emission gaps. According to this particular report, as far as the various steps which are actually being taken by various countries across the world, these steps will just lower the emissions by 7.5% by 2030. However, if we have to meet the Paris targets, then the required reduction in the emission is 30% to reach the 2 degrees Celsius target and 55% to reach the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. So the desired reduction amount is somewhat in between 30 to 55%, but the actual reduction by 2030 will only be just 7.5% if the present rates of emissions continue. So these are the key findings, and these can be used by you in your mains answers when you have to critically evaluate the steps taken by various countries in order to meet the Paris climate deal targets. This topic has appeared at page number 8 in the article section. The topic reads, "The dismal case of slashing the schemes and cutting the funds." The context of this very article is that over the last 3 years of period, over 50% of the existing centrally sponsored schemes have been discontinued, subsumed, revamped or rationalized into other schemes. Now from this context, an important keyword is the centrally sponsored scheme. What do you mean by centrally sponsored schemes? The basic difference between the centrally sponsored schemes and the central sector scheme is the mechanism of funding. The centrally sponsored schemes have the funding contributions from both the governments, that is the center, as well as the states. As far as the UPSC scheme of syllabus is concerned, this topic finds its importance when it comes to General Studies Mains Paper 2 in the section of Social Justice, which mentions the subsection of performance of various schemes. So first we should understand that what do we mean by rationalization of schemes. If we have to define it, rationalization of scheme is aimed at efficiently utilizing the limited budgetary resources. Now, to reduce the budgets of various schemes or to discontinue various schemes is not exactly the rationalization of scheme. Rationalizing the scheme basically is built on certain logics. If you are discontinuing some scheme, then there should be a sound evidence based backing to discontinue that particular scheme. If you are subsuming the scheme, if you are revamping some schemes, then they should be backed by evidence based logic. So there have been certain recommendations by various finance commissions in this regard. For example, the 13th Finance Commission said that the number of centrally sponsored schemes should be reduced and there should be a formula based planned transfers. Now, what is it? So, to understand this, as we have already discussed that what are centrally sponsored schemes, the centrally sponsored schemes funding is from both the government, that is center, as well as state levels. And therefore, it means that when it comes to these centrally sponsored schemes, it lays down financial liability on various state governments, which means that the state financial exchequer is burdened. So that is why the number of centrally sponsored schemes should be reduced, but then there should be a formula based planned transfers, that the central government must come up with certain formula, again evidence based logic. So there should be a certain formula on the basis of which the funds should be transferred to the state governments. This will solve two things. One, it will incentivize the states to perform, and second, the states will not be dependent over the central for their funds, because now the center will be under obligation to transfer the certain funds periodically to the state governments on the basis of this very formula, which will obviously be in the public domain. On similar lines, the 14th Finance Commission says that the institutional mechanism for transferring the funds should be revised. Again, the institutional mechanism basically means that there should be certain clear-cut guidelines on the basis of which these schemes should be formulated, the funds should be transferred, etc. So that is why, on the basis of these recommendations, in 2015, a subgroup of chief ministers was formed, and it reshaped the centrally sponsored schemes into 28 umbrella schemes. There were more than 250 schemes which were recategorized into 28 umbrella schemes, out of which 6 were the core of the core schemes, 20 were the core schemes, and 2 were the optional schemes. On similar lines, the 15th Finance Commission said that the government should discontinue the schemes that are very small or they are no longer necessary, because the recategorization was already done. So obviously there is no point in continuing very smaller schemes. Moreover, in addition to this, the 15th Finance Commission also came up with the idea of minimum budget threshold allocation. According to this, there should be a minimum level of the budget allocation for various schemes or departments. If certain department is allocating the budget below this level, then obviously it should give the explanation that why it has cut the budgetary allocation for any particular scheme. This was aimed to cut the unnecessary reduction in the budgetary allocations. And that is why this article says that there are various negative impacts of reduced budgetary allocations unmindfully for the welfare schemes. For example, it says it directly impacts the social welfare. The article comes up with the examples and arguments. For example, it says that the schemes which were run by the Women and Child Development Ministry have been reduced to just 3 number of schemes out of total 19. For example, Mission Shakti itself has replaced 14 number of schemes which included the Beti Bachao and Beti Padhao scheme. Second, it has focused towards the budgetary cuts also. It says that in the financial year 2022 to 23, the allocation for the NPK fertilizers, that is nitrogen, phosphorus and potash fertilizers, was lowered by 35%. But this reduction in the fertilizer subsidy was coterminous with the Ukrainian war. And we all know that Russia-Ukraine war have led to fertilizer shortages on one hand and increase in fertilizer prices on the other. So that is why at this particular point of time, if the government has reduced the allocation for these fertilizers by 35%, then it is a matter of grave concern. Further, it also says that it directly affects the livelihood opportunities for the poor people. Again, it comes up with the example of Garib Kalyan Rojgar Abhiyan. Now, this particular scheme was started in order to provide the livelihood opportunities for the migrant workers who returned during the COVID pandemic. However, again, this scheme has subsumed 15 other schemes. Now, this particular scheme was there for around 125 days, but it has subsumed various other schemes also. And this was in addition to the again reduced budgetary allocation for the MG Narega scheme by approximately 25%. And now, because there have been continuous reduction in the budgetary allocations for various welfare schemes, it has also resulted in delaying in the salaries for the healthcare workers. For example, the article says that the salaries of the ASHA workers have been delayed for up to 6 months. Regularization of their jobs continues to be a struggle, with wages and honorarium stuck at the minimum levels. So that is why this article says that government should differentiate between the cuts in the budgetary allocation and the true rationalization of various welfare schemes. And therefore, it says that government should focus on building the human capacity, address the issues of corruption, leakages, inclusion and exclusion error for various schemes, and provide better public goods. So the focus should not be on reducing the various schemes, but to efficiently manage various welfare schemes in order to provide the public goods. And therefore, rather than having a target of fewer government schemes, the government should raise our aspirations towards better public service delivery. So this was the opinion of the writer in this particular article, and you can use these arguments while writing certain answers which demand such arguments.